Hi everybody, it's Jane McElvany Coonce, and today we're going to be painting skies. We're going to cover two topics. We're going to paint cumulus clouds with beautiful blue sky, sunny day, and we're going to do another one that's more of like as the afternoon gets late and there's prettier colors, yellows and oranges and pinks and purples in the sky. Both have clouds in them, and so hopefully, both of them have clouds in them, and you'll see how to do it. Now, the first thing you have to ask yourself when you're painting is, and I'll just say, I did tone my canvas. I toned it with a minimal amount of burnt sienna and a lot of mineral spirits so that the canvas isn't just white. You can paint on a white canvas, and I've done that many times when I forgot to tone it. But the nice thing about toning it is if you skip a spot, it's not white showing through, it's a color showing through. So it's kind of has a nice feature to it. Now, the first thing you have to decide is, do you want to do it vertically or do you want to do it horizontally? And of course, normally you know what you're painting, the clouds as well as the landscape. And some of you may know what you're doing, or if you're waiting for me to send the landscape part of it, you'll know. But just pick whether you want to do it horizontal or vertical. The other thing you want to decide is, where is your horizon line? That is, where does the sky meet land? If this is a painting about skies and about clouds, and the landscape is really insignificant, you could put your line way down here and have the whole painting basically skies with just a little bit of land and maybe a little bit of water or mountains or whatever. Minimal amount, because the painting is about the sky. In general, though, most paintings that are landscapes are about the landscape, and so we don't put the the horizon line way down here. We might put it up here so that a third of it might be clouds, and maybe a third might be the ocean, and another third might be the sand, or if you're doing a seascape. But you have to kind of make those decisions before you start. And you can draw with either paint, or you can draw with charcoal or a piece of pastel. I don't recommend using a pencil because it does come through and you can see pencil. A lot of times when I'm drawing, I just pick out a color. You know, it could be burnt sienna, it could be ultramarine blue, it could be any color, doesn't really matter. And I thin it with mineral spirits, and I then decide, where is my horizon line? And my horizon line, I think in this case, I'm going to do it. You never want to put it dead center, okay? Because then it's 50-50 and that's kind of boring. So I'm going to move it up just a little bit. I'm going to say my horizon line is here. I'm drawing with very thin down paint. It's has mostly mineral spirits in it, so that if I decide I don't like that, all I have to do is dip my paper towel in mineral spirits and I can erase it, and it'll come right off. So that's the nice thing about drawing with paint, is it's very easy to correct things. So here's our photograph that I'm going to work from, and I suggest you don't have to paint this exactly. You're not married to that photograph, but it does give you an idea of what you're going for, so that you're not just making it up, because I've seen people make up clouds and they all end up with these Hostess Twinkies floating in the sky like this, and it looks very fake. So that's why I say have a photograph to look at, just to kind of help guide you and keep you from being too symmetrical. Our brains love symmetry, but we want to get away from that because it's much more interesting to have asymmetry.
Jane,
yeah.
I don't know if other people are like this, but it would be helpful to me if you moved the camera over a little to the left so that I could see more of the picture.
Yeah. All right.
More of the photograph.
Like that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw where I think my clouds are going to be. And like I said, I'm using this sort of as a guideline. It may not be exactly like this. I'm going to have sort of a crescendo coming up in here. It dips down and then maybe comes up a little bit. It's nice having a little rhythm in your paintings. If everything is straight across, sometimes it can look a little boring. This cloud comes almost all the way down to the mountaintops. we could do that. I might kind of, again, make it a little uneven just for variety's sake. But you can do it straight across here because that's the bottom of a cloud and that would look fine. You just don't want to do straight across up here because that would not look fine. Once you sort of have your plan of your design of your clouds, and you could certainly change your mind as you paint things. You're never stuck with anything. What I would do is, and in this sky, notice how it's very dark blue at the top, and as it comes down, it gets lighter blue, and very light blue down at the horizon line. So I'm going to take ultramarine blue and cerulean blue. Ultramarine blue is sort of that mid-tone blue, and I'm going to paint around where I think I want my clouds. And I'm using nice thick paint. This I do not want to thin with mineral spirits. I want it to be nice and thick because I don't want to have to paint this twice. And what I'm going to do is make it very dark right at the top, almost like a line. And then immediately add some white to that same mixture so that as I move down, it gets a little bit lighter. And each time I move down, just add a little more white, just a little bit lighter, cutting around where I think my clouds are going to be. Fortunately, because I had too much mineral spirit in there, it's a little bit wet. Okay, so no, you're not putting anything in your paint. No liquid, no mineral spirits. You're just painting nice thick paint. And then below the cloud, I want really, really pale color. So I'm going to add a lot of white and just a little bit of blue. Too light. And put a little blue right here at the horizon line. Now, we want clouds to be soft. We don't want them to look like balloons or, solid objects in the sky. So our goal is to keep our clouds very soft looking. There may be a few hard edges where in cumulus clouds where the sun really hits them. Sometimes you'll have a very hard edge. But look up here. Look how soft edged these clouds are at the top or over here. Now, most clouds are going to be soft edged except for if you're doing cumulus clouds, you'll have a few places that they are hard edged. You don't want to make everything hard edged because then it's going to feel like an object in the sky as opposed to vapor. So the next thing, in oil painting, we usually work from dark to light. So the darkest part of the cloud is kind of a purplish color. You could either take your ultramarine blue at a pinpoint, and I do mean a pinpoint of alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a kind of a burgundy color like Washington football team's color. But you don't want to use a lot of it because your whole painting will be red. So use and when I say pinpoint, I mean pinpoint. Here's, that's just ultramarine blue with a little bit of alizarin. It might be a little too dark. If you don't want it bright purple, the other thing you could do is, again, add a pinpoint, and I do mean a pinpoint of burnt sienna. It'll gray it a little bit. This is a little brighter, this is a little grayer. But both of them are a little bit too dark. So I'm going to add a little bit of white into this. And I'm going to put down where I think I see the shadow. And, let's say you're putting it down and you go, oh, I made a mistake. I put it in the wrong place. So what? You're not going to hang the photograph of the cloud next to the painting. So nobody's going to know but you. And you'll forget by the time you get into the rest of the painting anyway. Usually the shadow color is on the bottom of the cloud because the sun is coming from the top and therefore the bottom is in shade. The difference would be is if you're doing a sunset, then no. The lighter part of the cloud will be underneath because the sun is low in the sky and therefore lighting up the bottoms of the clouds. So even these little wispy things have some shadows in them. And okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch colors and I'm going to go towards the lighter color of the clouds. And there might be a lot of colors that you see in there. One of the things you can do is first put down your basic colors like I've done, and then we can go back in and add some other things. So you never want to use pure white. Pure white is going to stand out too much and be too stark. What I usually do is take white and I add just a pinpoint of a yellow, like Naples yellow, or if you don't have Naples, you could use cad yellow, something that's a little warm and creamy. And I'm going to first paint my whites on, trying not to hit the sky. I do want to blend it, but not yet. I want to kind of just get the placement down of these clouds. And the minute I hit that blue, then it's going to get soft, which we want, but I want to first get some light colors down. So I'm just tapping them on. If you notice, I'm just kind of taking the side of the brush, putting them on. It looks sort of paint by numbers this way at first, but then once we start blending, it doesn't. And underneath some of these clouds, you may see sort of a grayish, maybe you might even see a little yellow ochre in there. I mean, if you stare at something long enough, you're going to see every color in the rainbow. Put a few up here. And now we're ready to blend. And when you blend, what you want to do is, I've been using a bristle brush. I'm going to switch to a soft hair brush that I want to pull the white into the dark, because if you pull the dark into the light, you'll lose all your lights. And just kind of gently pull that light in there. And I'm keep wiping my brush with a paper towel, because I'm picking up, as I pull the white in here, I'm picking up that paint. I don't want to pull that blue back up in there. So I'm kind of softening it at the edge, pulling the white down into the shadow. And then let's do the top of the clouds the same way. Well, actually, we could pull this light of the sky into the shadow there. And if you don't have enough paint down, just grab your brush and put a little more paint down. Soften all of that, just so it's a very soft edge there. And now let's pull the light into the blue of the sky. Don't pull the blue into the white, because again, you'll lose your lights very quickly. I need some white there, missed that spot. And we'll begin to soften a little bit. I'll get my white out again, add a little, I forgot this little cloud here. Now, we want it really soft. I do anyway. I mean, some people might leave it just like this, but I'm going to come in here and just kind of soften and keep wiping my brush on the paper towel. This time as I soften, I'm just kind of going along the white and the shadow line and just kind of keeping it all blended. We also can, after we blend things, we can go back in and add some more lights again. So for example, just kind of blend a little bit. I could go in here. I kind of like that look, but I could come back in here with my light again, thick paint, no medium, no mineral spirits, and just tap on some lighter colors right at the top of the cloud. This time I'm going up into the blue a little bit. Try, you know, your brain loves symmetry, so try to avoid that. Let this dip. Maybe bring this one up a little higher. And again, you can soften some of these. The other thing you can do is, if you find it's just blending too much, you can also let it dry, and when you come back in later, you can add more lights again, because sometimes what happens is if it gets really, really wet, there's no way you're going to get real bright in here unless you just tap it on and leave it. I mean, it's just not going to happen because it's mixing with what you have down below. So at some point you can say, okay, I think I need to come back after it's dry. Now let's go back in. I might add some more shadows, because as I look at this, I mean, some of these have little shadows right under here, maybe right in here. You know, you can kind of break up some of the clouds just by adding a few little shadows here and there. And I'm just going back into that same mixture that I had before. Just kind of softening too as I put it down. And sometimes you go overboard and you kind of get rid of all your lights and you got to go back and add them again. I'm going to soften this a little bit. You might, like this has a very dark cloud, and if you want that look, you can mix up just a darker purpley blue gray and put that in. Again, you could take ultramarine green, I'm sorry, ultramarine blue, um, alizarin crimson, and a little touch of burnt sienna. And in a couple places, if you wanted just a little bit darker cloud, you could get that in there. And again, always soften. You don't want any hard edge. Maybe you want a little darkness up here or something. But this is the kind of thing that you can kind of play with. This to me right now looks too straight. I'm going to come in and I'm going to take a little more light color and pull it down just a little bit so that that purple line isn't so perfectly straight. And let's soften that and see what happens. I could also do just the opposite. I could take that darker purple and in some places pull it up a little bit so that I'm breaking up that little straight line that I sort of had that I didn't like the looks of. The other thing you can do when this dries is you can also add other colors in there. If you stare at clouds long enough, you're going to see lots of things that you wish you'd put in there, and you can always add them later. You don't have to put them in wet into wet like we're doing right now. I'm going to add a few little highlights, see if I can get them to stick a little bit. But that's kind of it with clouds. The secret to clouds is keeping them relatively soft. I would say it's better to have soft clouds than hard edge clouds. The hard edge clouds have a tendency to just look stiff and also look like they are not vapor, but more of an object. You don't really want that. The other thing you can do too is if you have clouds next to each other, let them bleed into each other. They kind of bleed in. Like if you wanted to have that little highlight on that, you could come back in here and pull that highlight on and cut into that other cloud. But first start off by keeping it soft and gentle, because the soft and gentle will be more convincing than the real hard edges everywhere. All right, so that's the first demo. One of the things I would say is it's always handy to know what the landscape is. And in this demo, I do not know what that landscape is going to be. Well, actually, I've pulled some pictures that I'm going to send you guys, but it's darken a little bit right there. But in general, usually when you paint, you have an idea what the whole painting is going to be. Let's say you decided, I don't like a mass of clouds like that. It looks too big. You can either let it dry, or you can come back in here. I'm just going to do this just to show you. Let's say we wanted to break this up into two different sections. I could come in here and cut the sky in here again and change what I have so that we don't have just one big line across the sky, but that we have now two sort of separate entities of clouds that are hanging out together. So you can always change your mind. And then let's say later on you decide, oh, I liked it better the other way. Well, you can always add it back. Anyway, any questions on the first cloud demo? And this is considered the, the most typical type of clouds you're going to see. If later on too, just for emphasis, if you decide you want to have a little more darkness, you could, go back in and make things a little darker at the top. If you got too dark down here, you can make things a little lighter down here. This cloud even looks like it has little highlights hitting at the bottom for some reason. You could even come in and do a little suggestion of by just tapping some cloud structures underneath there too. But I would say if you can keep your clouds soft, they're going to look much better. The other thing you have to do, and I'm going to do it right now just so I don't forget, is make sure that where the sky and the land or the horizon line, it can't go downhill. It's got to be straight across. Now, if you're doing an ocean, 100% straight across. The earth may be round, but you can't see it. If, for example, you're doing this mountain, obviously mountains can go down, and you might see more sky over here than over here. But in general, the horizon line is straight, unless the terrain is doing something. So I'm going to leave that as right now for this one. And we're going to go on to the next demo. The next demo is more of a sort of late afternoon dusk. Again, I have another canvas. I toned it with the burnt sienna, mineral spirits. You don't have to do this landscape. I'm just going to be looking at the sky. And again, you have to ask yourself, where's the horizon line? In this case, it's a little bit above, if you were going to actually do this photograph, it's a little bit above halfway mark. But this is a square and this is a rectangle. But you never want it 50-50. And you also want, like, for example, the place that catches your eye is this light area. So my guess is if you're going to paint the sky like this, whatever you put here is going to capture a lot of attention. Notice in a late afternoon sky, sort of at dusk, there's no detail in things. Everything is dark. So you wouldn't have a white boat in here. The boat would probably look either blue-gray or purpley gray. It's not going to be white looking because there's not enough sun hitting it to make it look light. But again, we'll start the same way. We're going to take a brush and we're going to decide where is the horizon line. In this case, I'm going to maybe make it below halfway mark. I don't know. I really should have thought of what I was going to do. Let's move it up a little. I'll move it up. This way, I could do water if I wanted. If I were going to do the scene, I'd have the water, let's say, like here, and the grass here. And that would be a very pleasant composition. Now, I'm going to start the same way, but this time we have to think about something. We have a lot of colors going on in here, and they don't necessarily play nice with each other. And what I mean by that is, in a sky, you can see purples, you can see blues, you can see yellows, you can see pinks, you can see oranges, but you don't see green. You never see green in a sky. So if you're going to put yellow down and then you're going to put blue next to it, you're going to end up with green, because if you remember from color wheel theory that if you mix blue and you mix it with yellow, you come up with a green. And we don't want green in the sky. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that when we put yellow down, that we then put something next to it that is the buffer to keep it away from turning green. And here's what I mean by that. I'm going to actually, in this case, last time we painted the blue around here first and then did the white cloud, but we don't have any white clouds. I'm going to paint the lightest thing in here first, this yellow piece. And you may even want to draw where that yellow piece is. I could take a little bit of yellow ochre and just say, okay, I'm going to have the yellow come down to the horizon line. It's going to come up to about right here. It's going to come up like this, and it's going to go up a little bit. And I'm just trying to draw where I plan to put my yellow, because once you put that yellow down, you want to keep it clean. And if you put down the purple first, there's no way you're going to get that bright yellow in there. So notice the brightest part is right here, and it's very, very bright. This time, I would suggest using some color like cad yellow. Cad yellow is a very bright yellow, and you can add white to it. Well, you should add white to it because it's semi-transparent, but if you add mostly white and just a little bit of yellow, you're going to get a really pretty color like you see in the photograph. So I'm going to just take a little bit of cad yellow, and let's see if this is, okay, yeah, that looks good, and put it on pretty thick. And as we move out from that area, it is yellow, but not as light. So I could add cad yellow into that white. I might even add a little yellow ochre in there just to keep it, to dull it a little bit. It might be too dull. It looks more like mustard. Let me go back and add some more white to this. And I'm trying to first plan out where all the light areas are. This is going to be light. This is going to be light. It kind of dips down a little bit right here. We're going to have some orange in there. We're going to have some pinks in there. We're going to have some purples in there. But we cannot put purple next to yellow. Only way you could do that is if you painted the yellow, let it dry, and then you came back and painted the purple. But then you'd have a very hard edge. You wouldn't have a soft edge. So I would suggest this method that I'm going to show you. All right, so we have the yellow down. And now that I put all that yellow down, that little light patch doesn't look very light. So again, more white, less yellow. Put it on really thick there. We also have some orange in here. And you can either, if you have cad orange, go ahead and use it. If you don't, you could take a little bit of your cad red and mix into your cad yellow. And begin to put in sort of a peachy color. Don't put it in pure cad yellow or pure cad orange. Mix it right into this yellow mixture that you made. And you want, some places might look a little more orange, like right here, it looks a little more orange. Other places, it might be more sporadic, like if you look over here, there's a few little spots of orange, but then it skips, and then there's other little spots. And so we can come back and add these too, but you kind of want to put them in. Now, the purple does look like it's right next to the yellow, but here's what I suggest. I suggest taking, to make purple, again, if we look at our color wheel, if you look at the color wheel, to make purple, if you mix red and blue, you get a purple. So the way to keep the yellow and the purple from mixing, which could make a mud or gray, which wouldn't be awful, but I usually take a red color, like permanent rose, phthalo red rose, alizarin, any of those, and mix it into the yellow so that as you transition from the yellow to the purple, we'll put a little rose down first, even though it's not in the photograph, but it will dissipate once we put the purple down. So anywhere we're going to have purple next to the yellow, I'm going to put a little bit of rose down to be the buffer in a sense. And now, as I put the purple down, we can use that same mixture that we used in the other one in the shadows. Ultramarine blue, touch of alizarin crimson, and I do mean a touch because it'll take over the whole painting, and white. And if you don't want it bright purple, you can gray it by adding a little burnt sienna. So right here, next to this rose, I'm going to put this purple down. And when we blend it, right now we're kind of doing the paint by number thing, but when we blend it, you won't really see that rose. It'll turn into a purpley color, and it'll look very pretty, and it won't look gray. There are different shades. This is very light purple. This is very dark purple. So you're going to have to play with that too. You're going to have to add some lights as you get down here. Let's see that. Again, I put yellow there, and I'm going to have a problem getting that purple on there without getting gray. I could even go, you want to be very careful if you have blue next to yellow, because then you're going to end up with green. And if you don't put a buffer color in between them, you're going to have a mess. I want this to be soft, so I am going to have to add just a little bit of the red right next to that so that we have something to bleed into. Wipe my brush and just kind of soften that. I put that all in the wrong spot. Get rid of that. This is actually kind of lavender in here. So a little lavender right next to that very light spot. And we're going to blend this in a minute, but always try to kind of get your colors down before you start blending so that you have everything in place and things are, you know, makes it easier to blend the whole thing at the same time instead of working in one spot at a time. Pull that purple right next into that rose color that we put down. And there is a very dark color here, and it's almost like a little triangle. And then we have some blue up above. So we'll go ahead, I'm going to first just kind of put down my purpley color. We may have to add a little darker color in a minute if it's not dark enough. And then we'll put the blue sky up above. we're aiming for very soft clouds in this picture. There is no cumulus clouds, no hard edges at all. It's very, very soft. So everything that you put down, you can even kind of scrub it just so it feels a little fuzzy. There's also a little bit of this purpley color up at the top.
So Jane, is that a bristly brush you're using?
Yeah, if you ever see me scrubbing, I'm scrubbing with a bristle brush. Bristle brushes you can scrub with. Soft hair brushes, no. You'll ruin your soft hair brushes if you scrub with them. So bristle brushes are nice in the sense of you can really kind of put painting down. You don't have to scrub like that. You can, you mix up enough paint, then you can, try to get some more color here. If you mix up enough paint, you don't have to scrub because it'll just cover it. But I was running low on paint, so I kind of scrub. But I like scrubbing too. It kind of gives you a soft edge. All right, so we do have some blue in here, and we also even have little almost pinks in here too, in the clouds. So I'll go back to my first mixture, ultramarine blue, cerulean, and white, and keep it very light though, because if you notice up there, it really does feel very light blue up here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Maybe there's a, let's see, there might be a pink cloud here, pink cloud here, pink cloud here. That blue is looking very blue. It's looking purple. I'm going to add more cerulean in here and see if I can get it to, yeah, there we go. It looks more blue now. And I can tell this is about to drop. Be careful with your easels. Every once in a while they get loosened up, and the next thing you know, your whole thing drops and falls on the floor. And I'm just going to paint around these clouds, trying to keep the edges soft, but we're going to blend them in a minute. This type of sky takes a little more work than the other one. The other one is actually a very simple sky to do. Look how light it gets there. So we could even come in with a lighter blue in here and put that in. And also, we can, once we get everything covered, we can analyze where we need to go lighter or darker too. And then for the pink clouds, I might just take, you know, alizarin and white, but not much alizarin because alizarin is very powerful. Another color that's pretty is that permanent rose. That looks too dark. Permanent rose is also known as phthalo red rose, and it's a quinacridone color. It's very pretty, great for flowers. Just fill that in a little bit. And then we're going to make those lighter, and also, there's actually some over here too. Missed those. Hold on. Put a little white in this. All right, so now we're ready to blend. We've got everything covered. You want to make sure too that you have put down enough paint. I can tell in a couple places, like right here, this paint is too thin. It's not going to blend. If you don't have enough paint down, what happens is that you don't have enough to push around, and therefore when you try to blend the clouds, it just doesn't move. So I'm going to put just a little more paint down. All right, so now I'm going to switch brushes from the hog's hair brush, the bristle brush, and switch to a soft hair brush. And I'm going to start again, same way. You always want to pull the light into the dark. And in this case, I don't want to lose that yellow, so I'm going to pull the yellow down and be very careful that I wipe my brush like almost every time or every other time, because otherwise I'm going to end up with purple up in there. And then once I've pulled them down, just kind of straighten out the line. Same up here, pull this yellow up into that little rose color that we put down as the buffer. Everything, we want everything to be very soft.
Steve here, Jane. I thought that when you were doing that first set of clouds, that after you put on the dark and then you added the white, that you pulled the dark into the light.
Never, ever, ever, ever. No. You've got to pull the light into the dark, because what will happen is it's very easy to lose that light. I can show you. If we pull this blue into this light, it's gone. See, it disappears. But if I pull the light up into the blue, you can keep it better.
Okay.
So be careful with that one. Yeah, you definitely do not want to pull the dark into the light. Just the opposite. Always pull your light into your dark.
Gotcha.
It's very easy to lose your lights, actually.
Jane, we've lost the focus on the canvas.
How's that?
That's
No, it's
still
just a
quite
giant,
blurry.
giant blur. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I went out and
If
came
you
back.
zoom out a bit, it'll help with the focus.
All right.
I think it's pixelating. It was not so much the focus as just the camera, the conveying of the pixels wasn't as good.
How's this?
Now
That's a lot better.
Okay.
It's
Much
better
better.
now. Yeah, it's kind of going in and out because I think, I don't know, maybe bandwidth or something.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can't ever figure out why sometimes, you know, we've got good focus and other days we don't, when it's the same. All right, what I'm trying to do now is soften edges, but I've lost some of my lights up here, which I'm going to have to go back and put in. And I could probably go darker in this darker cloud. So let's first put some more darks down. I'm going to mix up ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of burnt sienna, and a lot of white. And you might have to play with that because you think you've got the right color, and then all of a sudden, yeah, that's nice and dark. So I'm going to put a few more darks down here, especially at the bottom, because it's in shadow. And also there's this little arm up here that somehow got lost. I'm going to put that back in there. And switch to my soft brush again, and just everything I do, I'm just going to kind of soften. I am going to have to go back in and add a few lights now because, especially up in here, they disappeared. So I'm going to take my light pink and put a few little lighter colors. Put it on pretty thick at first. Always soften it. The other thing is, you know, I'm blending, but you can also, there's plenty of people that like that little look like this, where you don't blend. I mean, you don't have to blend. The only thing is you don't want hard edges in clouds. You've got to make sure that you somehow reach a compromise between having stroke marks that are interesting and also making the clouds look like clouds and not some hard object floating in the sky. Now this, like I said, this sky is much more difficult, and you don't have to do both. What I would suggest maybe is pick, if you're a beginner painter, definitely do the first one, because that's the most typical type of painting. I'm trying to get the sky a little lighter up here. It's got a little too dark, I think. So I'm putting a little bit lighter color on here. That's the kind of sky that you see in most paintings, where it's a daytime painting, it's bright blue sky, or even if it's a blue-gray sky, I mean, the clouds are soft, and it's very pretty to see, you know, to see it, and it's just typical. So I would say for a beginner, definitely do that. Now see how adding these lights have made this dark look darker. Before it wasn't looking dark enough, but instead of going dark, I just added some lighter colors around it. And you can blend this, or you can leave stroke marks. That's totally up to you. If, let's say, you now look at this and you say, okay, I want to go a little darker at the bottom here, and then I want to get these little orange things in. Sometimes what I'll do is I will put the darker stuff in right now. And I'm now, because I blended before, now as I put stuff on, I'm going to kind of leave it a little bit stronger stroke marks. In other words, allowing some of those stroke marks. And I'm trying not to have a straight line, so I'm trying to break this line up just a little bit. I personally like stroke marks, but I also like clouds to look soft and gentle. So it's kind of a combination between the two. And the other thing you might want to do is squint at your painting and see where should I be lighter, where should I be darker. I might, as I squint, I might say, well, I could probably go a little lighter down here even.
Is it my angle or my imagination, or are there yellow reflections up in the top where you've got pink in the sky?
It might look,
Oh.
it might look pink. It might look peach to you, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell.
It's also depends on, like in this case, your printer. Like I put a little peach in there and kind of go with the rest of the paint. I've printed out stuff, and then one time it looks, you know, one color, and another time it looks a little bit different. So even when you paint outdoors, you know, if you're painting outdoors a la prima, one person will see it one way and somebody will see it another way. So, I mean, as long as it looks good. I don't sort of like this look here. It almost looks like a bird flying in the sky. So I'm going to take some light blue and kind of cut into that a little bit. Just the other thing I would suggest too is constantly remember that clouds do have, you know, shadows and lights, but they also are not perfectly straight. So kind of try to keep away from getting them too straight and too. This is another way that you could also probably let it dry and come back in and, you know, take a look at it. I'll tell you a couple of tricks I like to do. I'm going to put a few more lights in here. I like to, number one, take my painting into the bathroom, hold it up in the mirror, and look at it and see if I like the way it looks in the opposite view. You can really pick out stuff very easily when you do that. I have found that that's one of the best ways. Or if you have a mirror, a hand mirror, turn your back to your painting and look at it in reverse. And you can really pick out mistakes. The other thing is take a photograph of it. I'd like to take a photograph of the painting and print it out. You can print it out in black and white and print your photograph in black and white. And look at both of them and see, did you get dark enough? Did you get light enough? Like right now when I look at this, I can see this line is a little too straight. This purple should have come down a little bit more. I mean, as you're working on things, one of the things about painting is you're working on things, you're constantly adjusting. I mean, you're never going to keep it exactly the way you started. You're going to adjust things and make things look better and improve each time you work on it. Also, if you have to, let's say if I wanted to get some more lights in here, I might have to definitely, in the yellow, let this dry because I have a very easy chance of hitting that purple, and next thing you know, my whole yellow is gone. So kind of be careful with that kind of stuff. Don't be afraid to let it dry and then come back and work on it. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you can play with. You look at it. I know with that boat painting that we did on the mini session, I've gone back a couple of times and just picked at that boat or picked at the water, just trying to adjust it. If you did a painting like this with water, look how that yellow reflects in the water right underneath that bright area. It's very pretty. Everything over here is more of light blues and darker blues, but right in here is this yellow and this peachy orange. And that's kind of very dramatic too. Later on, you could do things like you could take a brush and just do little small touches of, let's say I wanted to break up this yellow a little bit with little orangey streaks. You can just take a smaller brush and tap in some orangey streaks in here. I always try to paint with the biggest brush I can to begin with, but then later on, when you're doing the refining, you know, you might come in here and put a few little brighter oranges and yellows and things like that. It is easier though if it's dry to do it. And it's little strokes like this sometimes that can actually make a painting look very interesting because you've broken up a big area and it's not all the same. I also kind of always like to look at, shapes and what is happening. I see a little peachy color right in here, which might be hard to get in right now because it's wet. But I'll try.
So if you were going to put the tree branches in, you would wait until it was totally dry?
Absolutely. And what I would do is I would get this whole thing in, and then as you put in these branches, you could even draw them with charcoal or something like that, at least the main branches, just so you know where you're going. And then come back on top with a round brush and put them in here. When you get down to little teeny stroke marks like this, this is where you need a rigger. A rigger is a brush that is very skinny. It has very long hair. I'm going to show you. It's got very long hair and it's very skinny. It's like the size of a pencil point. Okay. Here is a rigger. I don't know if you can see this very well, but it is, if this is the ferrule, the end of the metal right here, look how long that brush is compared to, let's say, this brush here. Well, actually it's about the same, but it's very long and skinny and it has a nice point and it can make branches like nobody's business. And remember, when you do branches, never paint them like a rubber snake. We don't want any rubber lines in there. We make a point, make a stroke mark and pick up your brush. Make a stroke mark, pick up your brush. Make a stroke mark, pick up your brush. So that you have a sort of an angular look, even up in here. No squiggly lines. Because it'll look much more realistic if you do that. The minute you get in there and have all these rubber snakes running through there, it looks ridiculous. Now, even though this looks very bright right here, when it dries, a lot of times your lights sink in. Same with the other painting. The highlights that we put on the top of the clouds, when it dries, it may not look as light as it did when you put it in there. What I recommend is let it dry, and then if you have to, you can come back and hit them again and get it in there. But let's say you let something dry, and then after it dried, you realize you have a very hard edge and you don't like it. There are ways to get rid of it without repainting the whole thing. And basically what you do is you put just a little bit of paint on your brush, wipe most of it off, and you just scrub right at the edge. A little bit of color. I will send you some photographs of landscapes that can go into these. I mean, obviously you could do this. I believe this was New York City. I was driving up, I was on a bus, and I think that was looking over at, this is in New Jersey, and this is looking over to New York. But I have a couple other ones that you could add things in. Just remember that in a sky that is in late afternoon, you're not going to have any really bright whites. Everything's going to be dark, and it's going to be almost silhouette-ish. Whereas in the other one, you could have whatever you want. I mean, you could have ocean and sand and kids playing on the beach or whatever you want. So, any questions? Everybody unmute themselves, and also let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. For this particular photo, what colors would you use to paint the grasses and the trees?
Okay.
To keep silhouette look.
Yeah, good question. So we know that the grass is green, but it doesn't look bright green. It's certainly not any yellow, cad yellow in there. I would make a green with a yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and maybe a touch of burnt sienna to gray it a little bit. You want something, a gray green that's not going to demand attention. It can be green, but it has to be a gray green. These might even just be burnt. Somebody's. I'm going to stop the recording and then, wait a minute, hold on, let me figure out how to do this. Oh, I remember. Commands.